China is more. Now that things have calmed down, let's refocus our attention on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Everyone is talking about Russia and Ukraine. The fighting on the battlefield is now very slow. Why is this necessary in the new era of positional warfare? It depends on the basic tactics of both sides. For example, the Ukrainian side. It revolves around drones, AZUO, as the absolute core, other military resources, including positions, etc. Trench, offensive, infantry, and more. A small number of artillery pieces are. Have to. No one to cooperate. Machine operation. This is already a war. A completely new combat system. For example, recently in Russia, the 218th Regiment of the 127th Monster Division, under the 5th Army Group of the Eastern Army Group. The visiting group captured the village of Sivitkovo in Zaporizhia Oblast. What troop strength did the Ukrainian army deploy in the village? On this side, the area exceeds 8 square meters. The area within Ukraine is actually quite large, spanning kilometers. Army. The deployment only consisted of 2 reinforced platoons of infantry and personnel, and 5 pieces of equipment, including heavy equipment and small ones. Type of mortar and some vehicles. In addition, there are 2 drone control stations. 2 reinforcements, 60 or 70 men. With such a small force, what are they supposed to defend? 8 square kilometers. What? 8 square kilometers is quite a large area, especially the front. Yes, it's over 2 kilometers deep. 3 kilometers is a very large area, so according to the old tactics would have required to reinforce companies, maybe 200 or 300 men. That's all. That should be enough, but for now, 60 or 70 people is sufficient. But mainly it relies on various. These drones, including reconnaissance drones, monitor the area and intercept them at any time. Achieve the goal and what about the various things behind? Firepower, indicating the target. Rear firepower. Apart from a very small number of long-range artillery units, there are actually only a few in this 8 square kilometer area. The village only had 2 or 3 mortars. There were the most cannons, and then it mainly relied on various. The self-destructing drone is what this refers to. Commercial quadcopter drones. Bundled with various types of bullets. Medicine as a precision strike weapon, so there are 2 control stations in total. Less. 10 people controlling the hands, oh dear. Just 6. 8. People are just like that. Those who click can control the fixed amount of unspecified substance used each day. Humans and machines conduct various reconnaissance and strike operations. What's going on? There's an offensive area here, and there are landmines in front of it. The Russian troops, as long as they approach the vicinity of the offensive, in or near the minefield, it could be done by Ukrainian infantry. Once they've detected it, the infantry will to designate targets for these drone control operations. These small drones are starting to enter. They launched an attack, so each of these control stations is capable of enough. Why can't we control more than 10 drones? This is something we, as a middle Chinese people. If you can guess the specifics, then I won't. Anyway, I've told everyone. Controlling up to 10 drones simultaneously is sufficient. Upon seeing the Russian vehicles approaching, they engaged in those multiple engagements. One shot is definitely not enough. If the Russian army had infantry, then they could use. After using 1 or 2 drones to carry out this suicide attack, then use mortars for interception fire. The final blow. Arita line. This infantryman, hiding in the offensive, using machine guns or rifles to launch a counterattack and wear down the enemy, etc. The current tactics of the Ukrainian army mean that as long as the Russian army doesn't send a large force, then the dispersed forces of the troops, whether vehicles or infantry, also need to be considered. It will take time to get close. You'll need to remove a piece of it. You need a Ukrainian army deployment area of 8 square kilometers, 10 kilometers. Often, reconnaissance is conducted before taking control. Hold him. These 2 are the shapes of drone control stations. We can only launch the main attack after destroying his drone control station. Action otherwise, then you will suffer loss. So what everyone wants to say? Why can't Russia deploy more troops and concentrate more firepower on a small area? The narrow spaces are like the fighting styles used during World War II or the Cold War, actually now. Yin. Why is NATO so real? Verification communication system. The system is now fully connected to every corner of the Ukrainian army. It fell into every unit, so what? Russian military side. What kind of movement is this, us military? Yeah, he did all sorts of reconnaissance. Body. The system has been conducting direct intelligence gathering and can immediately intercept this us military. Information advantage plays a decisive role here, especially when combined with AI. The auxiliary command and dispatch system allows your troops to be known immediately upon assembly. And it can perform various things. Hit. Ukraine also has a considerable number of drones in its inventory, of course. Those drones are in small quantities. All the items came from Europe. Note that it doesn't say Ukraine can produce it itself because of the core. You still need to buy all the items. Purchase. Of. It's probably impossible to do, so now? It was a very long positional war. Rolling in the mud is basically this. In this situation, the Russian army is certain. It's a slow but necessary process to move forward. Ukraine continues to harass Russia's rear. So, let's take this as an example, which represents the economic goals. Large numbers of infantrymen filled in the lines and advanced. Line consumption, and there is. Supply unmanned. Functional. Guaranteeing supply is enough. This is what Ukraine did after holding out for a period of time. Land's current main strategy, of course, also relies on these large numbers of grassroots players. Broken. The repeated attrition on the front lines is why we say that the Russia-Ukraine conflict, don't think it's all about tactics. Extremely slow, but his skill level is definitely not low in the world. In today's world, he belongs to very high. Highly technical strength. The battle of content. Moreover, the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The war of attrition will continue for quite some time. We must be patient. Closely monitoring the 340 drones flying towards Moscow, Russia's retaliation was indeed evident. No partition. The night was just a matter of limited scale, according to reports. Moscow Mayor Sobyanin said. The past 24 hours, 340 Ukrainian drones flew toward Moscow and the Moscow region, with most flying outside. More than 50 aircraft were intercepted and were approaching the capital. As Russian forces launch a new round of strikes against Ukraine, Ukrainian Air Force statistics. On the evening of July 14th, the Russian side. By the 15th day, the morning launch included two Kh-5969 cruise missiles and 122 custom-designed drones. A total of 120 for aerial targets. Russia seems to have suffered a numerical disadvantage with 340 against 124. However, this algorithm treats the number of drones as a measure of retaliatory force. After all, war is not simply a matter of matching ammunition. The fact that the Russian military did not deploy hundreds of missiles over Ukraine this time indicates their methods of retaliation are unfolding. The situation has changed. In fact, the Russian military had been exerting pressure prior to this round of attacks. July 13th evening to 14th. Russia launched 8 Iskander missiles early this morning. Ballistic missiles launched by the S-400 system. There are also two Kh-5969 patrols. The total number of cruise missiles and 135 drones reached 145. Ukraine admitted that 1 ballistic missile and 25 drones hit 17 locations. Again, looking ahead, the Russian Army 7. On the 13th of the month, 3 cruise missiles and 130 for drones were deployed. 9 were used on July 12th. Kh-596. It is not difficult to see that the 94 Kh-31 anti-radiation missiles and 115 drones. Recently, Russia has not. Did it again? Hundreds of targets launched at once. Instead of launching a direct strike, the airstrikes were broken into multi-day operations. More than 100 drones are deployed daily, along with cruise missiles, anti-radiation missiles, and ballistic missiles. Unable to determine by Ukrainian air defense forces. Which night? Even with the main offensive capability, it's difficult to decide where to allocate the expensive Patriot interceptor missiles. A single target list. The scale of the evening was indeed not overwhelming. Looking at the days together, this has become the assembly line is specifically designed for the Ukrainian Patriots. The predicament of King is the change in Russian retaliatory measures, reducing the impact on the scene. The pursuit is to concentrate more ammunition on specific targets. The Russian Ministry of Defense stated in July. The strikes on the 15th targeted objectives in the Odessa and Chernomorsk port areas, including fuel storage facilities. Storage facilities and Human machine assembly site. Odessa state officials also confirmed that local port industrial facilities and residential areas were affected. This marks the 5th consecutive day of mixed air attacks. One is that Russia has begun to produce inexpensive drones, shift to tiered use of drones and scarce missiles. The Ukrainian Air Force mentioned various things in its report. Model. These include attack vehicles carrying warheads. Attack aircraft can also serve as decoys to expose radar and deplete anti-aircraft fire. The Russian military is also increasing its number of jet-powered drones and deploying more. The advanced models were reserved for the vertical Shenzhen high-value target. Such a combination of targets can force Ukrainian radar to operate for extended periods of time. Intermittent operation allows mobile air defense teams to operate continuously. The subsequent deployment of interceptor missiles by the Ukrainian side to attack both real and decoy targets has already generated a situation or problem. The valuable ballistic missile then used the remaining warning time to penetrate. Penetrating cruise missile. The interception rate reported by Ukraine, which is supplemented by strikes from different directions, often exceeds 80%. It looks like. On July 14th, a mere 25 drones and 1 ballistic missile were. 17 targets were hit. On July 15th, 2 more missiles and 18 aircraft attacked. The drones hit 19 locations, demonstrating that although the number was reduced, the efficiency was high. However, the improvement can only be described as something for onlookers. My appetite is getting bigger and bigger. 122 drones plus 2 cruise missiles were already sufficient for the early stages of the war. It belongs to the large-scale model air raid. By 2026, they saw the Russian military deploy hundreds of drones and actually felt their firepower was insufficient, instead saying, Russia's long-range strike capability has entered routine production and use stages to truly make things difficult for Ukraine. The Russian army no longer. It's not advisable to launch all at once only after a certain anniversary or major event. Make each act of retaliation a fixed, easily identifiable template. He every day exist. The tactics are different, the scale is no longer grand, but the fighting continues. It really hurts. Just this past weekend, July 4th, more than 70 planes. A drone sped 1,100 kilometers and plunged into a super oil terminal in St. Petersburg. Black smoke directly obscured the ports of the Baltic Sea, and at that time, the highest levels of both sides were working on a project at the front line. The mad town of Konstantinovka. Just moments before the fierce tug of war, Moscow announced on Friday that it had completely taken over this area. Immediately after the position was secured, Ukrainian President Zelensky made a public statement on Saturday, saying that if Russia really takes control of the area, Putin could absolutely go there to meet with him. They showed no leniency and directly labeled the other party's battle report as false propaganda. It's rumored that they'd fight tooth and nail to take over the wasteland. On the other hand, there's the energy hub that's been completely drained. These two events colliding on the same weekend is quite a blow. Let's see how this new twist in the conflict is revealed. Konstantinovka on the front lines is by no means an unknown place. It is the southernmost hard bone of the Donetsk fortress belt, Moscow. In order to break down this door, the heavy equipment department, the whole team pressed forward. Kovalev, a spokesman for the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, also publicly acknowledged the other side. The infantry have already penetrated into the main urban area and are fighting extremely fiercely. The fighting was fierce, but the position was still holding out desperately. Why are the two sides in this place, where not even a complete roof can be found? The desperate struggle was because capturing this passage northward would completely destroy the passage. The pit leveled out, tearing a large hole in the entire defensive zone. But just when everyone's eyes were fixed on, while the true killing blow was aimed at this ruin, it was actually 1,000 miles away. This oil terminal in St. Petersburg behind, an annual throughput of 12.5 million tons. What does that mean? It is a superpower that continuously converts crude oil into foreign exchange. The main artery is the ATM supplying the artillery at the front, and the result was on July 4th. Air raid sirens sounded in the early morning. Oil tank. Facing this cross-border attack, Zelensky responded on social media. The media's original words precisely describe this operation. Say, for remote sanctions. These 4 words immediately defined the set of movements. This is extremely vicious. Everyone should be aware of and take action against it. The use of 2 characters in the past was more common. Blockade and home perception. It involves freezing cross-border capital accounts and issuing various restrictions, orders, but only if the profits are high enough. The written bans are always circumvented by private cruise ship transactions. Some international buyers still blindly swallow crude oil, but now the defending side has completely overturned the table. Since financial blockades can't stop the monetization of crude oil, then use a drone to physically set your oil tanks on fire. This approach is very straightforward and doesn't care about international energy settlement networks. If the port is paralyzed and the oil pipeline is broken, no matter how much black gold your brother buried under the well, he'll only suffocate there. It is equivalent to forced with explosives. Cutting off the flow of transnational capital directly disqualifies you from participating in global trade. On one hand, they were repeatedly filling hundreds of meters of waste soil into the mud pit. On the other hand, it directly destroys the opponent's creation. A fire in the blood vessel ignited the focus of the war. It's no longer just simple land grabbing, it's direct destruction. Destroy the other party's physical connections in the global trade chain. The pro-unification faction is still waging a war of words over advancing an extra kilometer on the map. Meanwhile, in the small frontline town where power was cut off and there was no way to retreat, people sat in basements. Ordinary people simply cannot wait for the so-called victory report. Ukrainian drone attack successfully completed in one attack. Dozens of people were injured or killed, according to the base. The auxiliary post reported on August 3rd that a drone was Arsapolo, Krasnodar Krai, Russia. Subovka's fall. The initial report stated that 4 people died and 10 were injured. The injured included children. The Russian side later updated the casualty figures. The confirmed death toll has risen to 7, including 3 children, with 40 others remaining. 21 people were sent to the hospital with injuries of varying degrees. The incident occurred during the local peak tourist season, and tourists were gathered on the beach. Video available at the scene. The footage showed continuous gunfire emanating from the drone as it flew close to the shore, before it changed direction towards collision. The Russian side has characterized the incident as an explosion that occurred in an area where people were active. Ukraine's target. As of the time of this report, Ukraine had not acknowledged the attack, which was allegedly carried out by civilians. The original target of the drone was not specified. What can be confirmed is the location of the explosion. The site is not a military base, but an area open to the public. The seaside leisure area, as mentioned by Ukrainian media, is now the Putin Palace. There is evidence that does not support this claim. Arsipo Osapovka is a resident of Gerendik City. Coastal villages and towns within the jurisdiction. The actual explosion point was located near a local beach. The resort, named Lasvit, which Ukrainian media refers to as Putin's Palace, is located near Cape Edikopis. Further west, the two places are directly. The distance is approximately 22 kilometers, and it would be even further along the coast and roads. The report highlighted Putin's palace not because drones had entered the palace grounds. The sky above the park is because the statement is more convenient than the beach of Alsapovka. It's easy to attract attention, but targeting Putin's illegitimate son is even more bizarre. There is no evidence that the relevant personnel were at the manor that day. Flight routes and mission information. The information could prove that the drone was aimed at a family member. Furthermore, the so-called Putin Palace is not an official name in Russia. Instead, it is a political label that has long been used by opposition figures and Western media. This large estate is located near Jelenjik. Allegations were filed based on engineering documents and financial transactions, claiming that the project was actually used by Putin. Russia has consistently denied that the estate belongs to Putin, and Putin himself has also denied it. It is the president's private residence, so what exactly is going on with this building? These are just some gossip comments. They're fine for fun, but don't take them too seriously. The drone crashed 22 kilometers away and then reversed direction. The Ukrainian media's handling of the matter suggests that the manor must have been the target of the attack. The formula is not complicated. First, replace the Russian place names that are unfamiliar to the average reader with Putin near the palace. Then, linking the drone flight path to Putin's private life leaves room for further possibilities. Targeting the imagination of family members in this way. The dead on the beach can be glossed over without verification. Actual court rumors, on the contrary, took center stage. The report seems to provide more information. The information actually determined the matter. Mixing facts with political speculation misled readers into believing the attack was close to Russia. Private residence of Sri Lanka's highest-ranking official. What was the drone originally intended to attack? So far, it has not been obtained independently. Establish verification of a Ukrainian agency. Social media channels claim that the drone may have flown to a nearby location related to Russian missile industry. Related. The crash site was approximately 300 meters from the facility. It was also stated that Russian military-industrial personnel were present there at the time, which was only a single. The claims made by the Ukrainian side are not supported by mission log data on wreckage or any official statement from the Ukrainian side. Even if this clue ultimately leads to. In fact, this only shows that drones are capable. Targeting the facilities of Russian military-industrial enterprises does not prove his. Attacking Putin's palace is even more unacceptable. This proves he was hunting down his so-called illegitimate child. From Russia's perspective, the issue is also not viewed simply because the objective is any drones that are related to the military industry will disappear, flying near densely populated tourist areas. The attacking party should have foreseen that uncontrolled interception and debris fall could cause civilian casualties. Ukraine has been continuously increasing its influence in recent years. Long-range drones were used to attack deep into Russian territory in an attempt to strike energy targets, source facilities, and military-industrial complex. This also forced Russia to redeploy more of its air defense forces from the front lines to the rear. This type of warfare has lower costs but shifts the risks to cities and ordinary residents along the route. The drone ultimately crashed into the beach, whether due to its planned flight path or its interception. The result of the intervention was that none of the 7 victims would ever wake up again. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, from Moscow. Scott time. PM on April 11th. Since April. At midnight on the 12th, Japanese troops entered the Ukrainian army's 6,558 positions. Second stop. Fire violation time. The Russian Ministry of Defense. It is said that during the mutual reconciliation ceasefire, the Ukrainian army fired 690 bullets at Russian positions. 14 shellings. Fixed use. Artillery, multiple rocket launcher systems, naval guns, and tank guns. Bomb. In addition, the Ukrainian army also used 4 rotary wing drones against the Russian military. 5 were executed. 1,840 for strikes, including 4,650. 10 FPV drone attacks and 2. The attack by 166 octopuses and 140 others. 14 long range. Type. The Rush and planning of 749 medium-range unmanned aerial vehicle UAV munitions. German Ministry of Defense. It was pointed out that on the first day after the ceasefire ended and fighting resumed, Russian troops from Ukraine. An offensive was launched from the northern region of Kosamui to the southern region of Zabrzydzhan. The most intense hostilities at present are concentrated in China and the Middle East. The Battle of the Central Pole Group. Combat area of responsibility. There are 10,000. The soldiers of both sides fought against each other in Russia. A powerful counterattack organized by the Sri Lankan Armed Forces against the Ukrainian Army's 30th. The 5th Assault Regiment retreated too. At the original starting position, the fighting was ongoing at the time of publication. In the journey,